Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Anglia Ruskin University and this webinar in what is Global Entrepreneurship Week, but also International Men's Day and Women's Entrepreneurship Day. So a really fun-packed and thoughtfully packed day of celebration and awareness raising. Today, I'm really pleased that I've got two excellent panelists with me to discuss one of the things that many of our students, graduates, but many future business owners want to kind of talk about, which is finance and how do I, think about and go about financing my business idea to help to bring my idea into reality. So today, I'm hoping that we will be able to answer some of those questions, pose some pause for thought for yourselves, and also give you an overview of alternatives that may be available to you and things that you need to think about. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Professor Ren Kapur, who is CEO of X-Forces Enterprises and Enterprise for Life. Ren is the founder and CEO of X-Forces Enterprise and E4L, and which is a leading organisation that supports members of the armed forces community and others into self-employment. She is a professor of entrepreneurship here at Anglia Ruskin University, where she champions inclusive enterprise, practical skills development, and real-world collaboration between students, universities, business, and government. I'm also thrilled to have Nick Howe from NatWest, who is an enterprise partnership manager. Nick works with universities, accelerators, and the wider ecosystem partners to support entrepreneurs at every stage of their journey. Through NatWest's enterprise programs, accelerator support, and wider partnerships, he helps founders access coaching, networks, and finance, and he has a particular interest in helping underrepresented groups and regional entrepreneurs scale sustainably. Ren, Nick, welcome, and thank you very much for your time. So I'm going to pass over to Ren in a couple of seconds, but to kind of set the scene. But today, the kind of format is really a case of us talking around a few kind of key questions around finance, business startup, and scaling businesses. And I hope that from today, many of you will be able to take this advice forward, take this guidance forward, and realise your dreams, your passions, and take those, turn those ideas into reality. So without further ado, I'm going to just pass over to Ren, who's going to just set the scene and the context for today's talk.
Thank you so much, Professor Gary Packham, and it's wonderful to be here with you this afternoon and wherever you may be around the globe as well. So thank you for joining us and the ARU webinar on building together and why building and financing ventures responsibly matters, and really why it matters right now, I think, as well. We're operating in a world of sharp contrasts. Rising costs, geopolitical uncertainty, climate pressures, and at the same time, there's incredible innovation and opportunity. None of these forces are separate from enterprise. They shape the markets we serve, the people we employ, and the communities and ventures we sit inside. Entrepreneurship today can't just be about a smart idea and a great valuation. The real questions are, what are we building? Who does it serve? And at what cost is that? And just as important, what kind of capital are we using to get there, and what comes attached to that capital? Responsible finance isn't a nice to have or a tick box. It's about building ventures that are resilient, fair, and trusted. For founders, that means looking beyond headline numbers or a term sheet, or asking, or in my case, asking these three questions. What expectations does this funding create? And I think that's a really important one. So what expectation does this funding create? How will it affect control and culture and purpose? Culture and purpose inside an organisation, and does this align with the kind of organisation that I want to build or you want to build and grow? So for investors and institutions, it means recognizing that strong returns are increasing and are increasingly coming from ventures that balance profit and purpose and growth. And Gary Packham, you may have heard Professor Gary Packham say, let's do well to do good. And I think that's the ethos around how we not just raise capital, but how we use capital and how we build ventures that are transparent, sustainable, and grounded in real world responsibility. So I'm really looking forward to this webinar. I'm absolutely delighted to be joining Professor Gary and also Nick Howe, who I've known for many years, and hopefully it will be a stimulating conversation. So thank you again, and over to you, Professor Gary.
Thank you, Ren, and thank you for that, for setting the context. And maybe I'm going to start the talk today by bringing Nick in, and maybe just asking Nick an initial question that he can maybe give his reflections on. So, Nick, from our perspective, many of our students and graduates feel that finance is their biggest barrier to starting up. From your perspective at NatWest, what mindset should early stage founders adopt when they start thinking about funding and growth?
So thank you for the invite, first of all, Gary, and hello to everyone joining. For 30 years, yeah, I know I don't look old enough, thank you, but for over 30 years, I've had the real privilege of working with many different business owners. And so some of the things that I'll share today are just born out of the privilege of kind of working with founders that have shared what has worked, what hasn't worked. And I think in answer to your question around kind of barrier being sort of finance being a key one, undoubtedly it features. But I think probably what I would be urging people to kind of think about and set themselves up for is, rather than trying to answer every question on day one, is to break the journey down into stepping stones. So imagine you're outside a massive lake, and in the middle of the lake is a tiny island, and that tiny island represents your goal, your dream, your ambition for your business. Now, what we could do, we could all take a ginormous leap up, run up, and see if we could land on that island in the first go, but I suspect that we'll probably get a little bit wet. So the suggestion is, first of all, always having a goal, always having an ambition, but rather than trying to do that in the first go, is break it down into stepping stones so that we never lose sight of where we're heading. But actually what we're doing is trying to take a sure foot at each stage to edge us towards where we're heading. And finance would definitely be one of those. And I think where it's absolutely key is about having a growth mindset. And this starts to really sort of challenge the idea that you fall in love with your idea sometimes, and so you should. You're passionate about it, you want to see it happen, but don't be too passionate about it. What we need more than anything is validation. We need feedback, and we don't just need feedback from friends and family. We need feedback from strangers, people who we think will be customers of ours in the future, to really ascertain what they like, what they don't like about the product or service that we're about to launch. And I think if you can respond accordingly to those feedbacks, those reflections, then I think that puts you in a better position to launch a business that's more likely to work. And when you find a business that works, then I think the finance options become more widely available.
Thank you, Nick. That's very comprehensive. I'm going to just bring Ren in because obviously it's Global Entrepreneurship Week this week, and it's all about building together. So maybe just bring it back to how we do this together as an ecosystem.
Well, absolutely. And I'm going to start with Nick again on this one, because building together is all about collaboration as well. And collaboration, we talk about collaboration. Nick, you and I have worked together for a very long time, and we've seen great collaboration, but we've also seen collaboration where it's in spirit, it does want to work, but actually you don't want to go to the same ecosystem. You want to build that ecosystem for collaboration, whether that's universities and whether that's with alternative banking like British Business Bank, or whether that's other organisations like ourselves. So from your perspective, when have you seen great collaboration, and how can we harness that, particularly with young people and with those coming out of the education system, or indeed part of universities?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a wide-ranging question, but thank you for sharing that. So, I think first of all, you have to find your tribe, right? So, collaboration, I think, is first of all recognise, and again going back to growth mindset, we're human, right? So we can't be good at everything. So the first question and first challenge, particularly in a business setting, is what are my strengths? What am I good at? Then when you identify any areas where you've got gaps, where you've got weaknesses, then it's about trying to build those people around you who do have strengths, do have some expertise in those areas. And for some, building those networks is easier than others. Going back to the point around collaboration, I think it's so important that you have people who are aiming for the same goals, right? I'm a firm believer in it's about giving without the expectation of getting something directly back in return. And it's sort of so commonplace that when you help someone, somewhere down the line, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line, you then get something back from them. So I think leaning into other organisations who have strengths in different areas absolutely is key. So it's kind of building your squad, building your board table around you. And I think where it's really important as well is then with universities. So tap into building your impact skills with any schemes, competitions that are happening within the university. Really value the skills that you have. So I'm a massive champion of sweat equity, which is where individuals have got skills that they could potentially share with an up-and-coming business, and that's a business area where they lack skills. So you as a student could inject your time and energy into those. So I think that's really important. But Gary, I'll sort of just open that out to you in terms of other kind of university activity as well, because universities are a really key part to it all.
Thank you, Nick. And I know Ren was quite keen probably to come in there as well. So Ren, I won't forget that you would like to come in as well. But yes, from a university perspective, we are part of an ecosystem. We are not the ecosystem, and we need to operate very much in partnership and collaboration with those that are also supporting enterprise entrepreneurship. I think where we can come in is around obviously supporting our students and graduates to raise awareness, raise the option of entrepreneurship as a viable and desirable career path, but also ensure that our students and graduates understand and can connect with the wider ecosystem. I think if looking at that's the kind of university out. In terms of the university kind of in, we need to be much more open to businesses and entrepreneurs outside of our institution as well. We have expertise, we have facilities, we have talent. How can we work together with other like-minded partners, like-minded supporters of business and enterprise to help businesses, organisations and entrepreneurs really kind of get to grips of what the kind of value of their proposition is and how they can go about actually accessing and leveraging the support that universities can offer. But we need to do that in a responsive and timely way. So there are challenges that we need to kind of take on board. And as a university, we are really priding ourselves in being quick to respond, responsive, and meeting the needs of businesses and organisations. Ren, you wanted to kind of come in as well.
And it's actually picking up the thread from what you've just said, Gary, and also from what Nick said as well, because, if we go back to, we're talking about responsible finance. Now, we've got the university represented and we've got a high street bank represented. Now, if we take the thread about collaboration, we know that both of you have worked very closely with initiatives from British Business Bank to what you do yourselves. There's the NatWest incubator, which is absolutely amazing, which goes into how do we start a business, but how do we grow that and all the different components that are part of it. But you've got when you're looking at finance, you're looking at finance from your own back pocket. You're potentially looking at finance from the bank of mum and dad. But we live in we're very lucky right now that there is access to finance in different ways, whether that's startup funding or whether that's through winning a competition such as the NatWest incubator or other high street banks are doing. So I'm going to fire this right back to you and say, right, Nick, if and if you can take this as well, Gary, it may not be around the finance side, but it certainly will be about getting prepared for funding as and when it's ready. But going to Nick, there's a wealth of different, if I was a university, coming out of university, or even I'm in university and I've got a great idea, it's quite innovative, and it's going to help the community in some way. You're a banker. What would you say? How would I go about that? What are my different options to accessing finance from your perspective? What would you say to me?
So, first of all, there isn't necessarily a right and a wrong answer for people. Different founders will have different appetites for risk. Different founders will have different appetites in terms of whether they take in an investor, as an example. Some are more keen to keep hold of 100% of their business than others. So there isn't a job for us to sort of say the right thing is this, the right thing is that. I think our role is very much about informing people of the choices that they actually have available. And through our NatWest Accelerator app, one of the programs that we offer at a time and place that suit people is the Funding Accelerator. So basically, it will allow a founder to kind of work through the gears as the business grows. So working and starting at the lightest and best option would be grants. Obviously free money, as people call them, but the rarity of grants, particularly for profit-making businesses, is quite scarce. So we owe it to founders to kind of flag and help them to navigate whether a grant application may be applicable for them, particularly if they're an innovative business or if they're a social enterprise, charitable or community-led organisation. They are probably more likely to be finding a little bit more choice there. But then once you've kind of navigated that option, then you look at things like debt. You look at things like, is there a evidence in terms of, I know where my money is coming from, and so therefore I think it's reasonable that I could afford to repay X amount of pounds a month. So debt works very much on that particular basis. I mentioned earlier about sweat equity, and I think this is a massive area. If you've got a particular area, so let's say, for example, technology skills, where you would otherwise borrow some money, actually another option for you is, rather than borrowing that money on a potentially speculative position, what you could do is instead try and find a co-founder who has those skills and bring them into the business and gradually award them shares in the company as they make progress against the milestones that you worked on together. So none of you have had to borrow money, but jointly, you're getting closer to a proposition that you could actually take to market. So that's another idea. Crowdfunding is another particularly important option. If you have a look at the UK CFA website, so that's the UK Crowdfunding Associations, there are a plethora of different platforms that operate, and they vary in terms of the scenario that you may be in as a business. So for some businesses, they're looking for, I don't know, launch a fashion show to launch their fashion brand. And so they're looking for effectively for donations, but one of the tangible benefits that you could offer might be, for example, a front row seat. So if you donate a minimum of £100 to me, I will guarantee you the prestige of being on a front row seat for my launch night whenever that happens. So crowdfunding can be a popular option. Investors, again, is another angle to look at some point down the line. It may be very early on, depending on the business. It may be sort of slightly later. The UK BAA is the UK Business Angels Association. And again, that really sort of brings together a lot of the active angel networks across the country. The lesson that angel investors would share with us is don't just look for money, look for smart money. And basically what you're looking at is typically people who have been successful in business. They've got knowledge, contacts, experience. So as well as the cash, they're looking to inject those sorts of things around the table as well. So that's really important. And then lastly, I think a massively advantageous thing that we have in the UK is the startup loan scheme. It's helped so many businesses to set themselves up right from the get-go. Some great news that actually their classification is going to expand to 5 years of age from next year. But rather than me talking about it, Ren, I know through X-Forces, you've got the brilliant Enterprise for Life, and kind of that's a real success for you. So I'll bounce it back to you in terms of, what have you found and how many people has that enabled?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Nick, and that's a great segue into what we've done as an organisation. And I pride myself in saying that I'm a bit of a social entrepreneur in myself, and I encourage social entrepreneurship from a point of view that how do we not just create businesses, but how do we look at profits from businesses going into good causes. Now, we've had, the armed forces community is just one of the most amazing communities, but there's all sorts, whether that's women going back into work and they've decided to do their own thing, to other multicultural businesses that have set up. But we've supported over 4,000, we've funded through the Startup Loan Scheme, and that's about £40 million that we've actually funded to date. Now, it might not seem a huge amount, but we've helped over 10,000 people to actually start their own businesses as well, who may not have needed funding, but they wanted the wraparound support. But let me just zone back into the startup loans funding. We've got one of the highest success rates of microfinancing in the country. And that's not just about the people. It is about the people. It's great. But it's also about the wraparound support. And I know that you've alluded to that already in terms of make sure you're collaborating. And sometimes it's about what you're giving, whether that's mentoring, it's peer-to-peer, or it's masterclasses, and I know that you do some great masterclasses with us anyway. So I would say yes, in terms of have a look at what government is doing. The UK government is making a huge amount of strides right now to support startup, but also for growing and therefore scaling as well. So yeah, startup loans, ethical finance, it is still finance, it isn't a grant, and it's unsecured. There's a little bit of risk attached to it's about those there might be a little bit of risk, but we're seeing phenomenal growth from that sector. Over 11,000 jobs created, approximately. Those are about the figures that we've got to date. So yeah, thank you for that. Gary, I'm going to go back to you as well. Do you want to add into that?
I was just going to ask both of you, Ren. I'm very aware of all the wonderful work that X-Forces Enterprise does, and Nick and I are both massive advocates of that work. Just for the purposes of the wider, of the webinar, is that only for X-Forces, or is that something that you can support beyond the X-Forces community?
Yeah. And this we tend to do it through our relationships such as Anglia Ruskin University and a couple of others as well. No, we have got the ability to support non-military organisations as well. Or I say military, it's whether you've got a connection to the military. If you go far enough, Gary, you'll all have a connection in some way. But that aside, we are able to support 35% of the people that come to us that don't have an armed forces connection. So that's quite important. And actually, as a fellow of Anglia Ruskin University is quite, we do a lot of knowledge exchange, and we would love to continue to support some of the students. Can I segue into, and we did an amazing project last year with Anglia Ruskin University on entrepreneurship and the Entrepreneurship Impact Fund, which was, the fund was actually a grant, but you saw some amazing people come through that are students of yours. So it might be nice to touch on that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, and that will be available to students again next year, so not far away now. But our social impact fund is something that it's really trying to support students, graduates who've got ideas that are really trying to make an impact in the community, social value. So maybe not a traditional routes, but more a case of how are you actually doing well by doing good. To thank you for quoting me earlier. And we will certainly make sure that and we're very pleased that through the support that Ren and our corporate partners, that we're able to run that again next year. So please do watch that space. But the winner from last year is doing loads of amazing work in the educational space. And what the Impact Fund has actually revealed is that there's so much more to than the traditional model of entrepreneurship. There are so many of our students, so many of our community that are looking to secure finance to help others, and I think that's a really good, much to their credit, but also really reflects the values and the mission of ARU as well. So thank you for showing that, and please, those on the call, we will make sure that we promote those after this webinar. I'm just conscious of time, but I just wanted to be quite cheeky and maybe just go off. We've been talking about finance, but Nick and Ren maybe as well, but what does a finance-ready entrepreneur look like? I think it might be just worth putting that kind of question in there. Is there such as a typical finance-ready entrepreneur? Is there anything that they would need to have in place to kind of convince you or build a good argument for funding?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I think the first thing is, let's be honest, right? Most founders, finance is the area that they most dislike. There's no other way of beating around the bush. Numbers they're not their sort of best friend on a lot of occasions. So what I try to kind of amplify and I try to sort of share is that try and make the numbers work for you. Ultimately, what they are doing is they are painting a picture as to what is happening in your business right now, good or bad. And so I think the very first thing for me, when I look at Finance Ready, it doesn't actually matter what format, how people have presented, profit and loss and cash flow forecasts, but what works best for that founder. That is absolutely vital for me. I think what I also learn and always share is, again, reflecting on the fact that numbers are not necessarily people's favourites. There is a need to work on the business and not just in it. And I think people will often feel that because they're busy, that things must be going well. And that's because we're just focusing on getting product out the door, getting services issued, etc., etc. But that may not be the case. And so one definite kind of best practice is ring fencing some time at least once a month to say, what has actually changed? What's happened in the business? And change can impact on our customers, on trends, on cost prices, on marketing influencers. There's a whole manner of things that could well have changed. So where you've got your forecasts, you often have a column where it has the projected. So when you put it all together, you thought month one, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then what I suggest is that people add a blank column after each month. And the job there is when you take the time out to work on the business, you then say, well, that was what I thought was going to happen, but now reality has been and gone. What actually did happen? And I think when you then start to put those numbers in, you will see that it's either better or worse than you thought it was. That's your first trigger opportunity to then take action, to either make more of a brilliant opportunity or to address a challenge or an issue that's come to the foray. So I think that's a really important part. Ultimately, in terms of kind of affordability and whether someone will lend you money, it comes down to confidence. And so I think lastly, what I would say is where, for example, you've got evidence of kind of where your sales are going to come from. So you think in month one, you're going to generate, I don't know, £5,000 worth of sales. Don't let the reader think, well, where has that come from? Where has that number come from? If you've got existing customers and you're already doing £4,000 a month, or you've got contracts signed up ready to go, or you've got expressions of interest, all of those things can help the reader believe that actually, that £5,000 isn't just a figure that's plucked out of thin air. Actually, it's a number that we think is reasonable, and we can see where the expectation, where that will be hit from. So there'd be a couple of the things that I would suggest.
Ren, anything you'd like to add from your side based on the experiences you've had?
Yeah, and thank you for that, Nick. Nick's already alluded to what I was going to say with this second part, which is about the market. So having set up businesses of my own, some I've now exited, and of course I set up X-Forces Enterprise and Enterprise for Life as well. So the thing that I've always gone to, and it stood good to date as well, is to really understand the market and understand how many customers you're possibly going to have. Because the fact that, let's say, if you're in a certain county, yes, you've managed to demonstrate that there's a business case for you, but is that going to be the same if you went into a different county or a different country? Really test the market out so that not only is who are your competitors, but also how big is the market realistically and your market share as well. I've always, when I've started a business, I haven't gone for finance first. What I've done is started on a very small amount of money, bootstrapped it, and then tested it before going to have a look at how do I raise the investment, because whether that's tranched or whether that's in one go, actually really, if you've managed the cash flow, you can sometimes do it organically unless you've got a big spurt of growth as well. So my advice would be also know the size of your market, the realism of how much you can sell, test it out, and does your product or service have a life cycle? And what I mean by that is that it may be really good for 5 years or 10 years or for eternity, but you might want to look at, our technology is going to impact that as well.
Thank you both. And I've got one more question, but before I ask it, because I know it's something that's very close to both of your hearts, just to remind people that you do have the option to put some questions in the chat, and if we can get time, we'll answer those questions as best we can within the time we've got allotted. But perhaps just a final question, because it is Global Entrepreneurship Week. It is very much about Together We Build. It's very much about community. It's about collaboration. It's about inclusivity. And I know both of you feel very strongly about inclusive finance, opportunities for all. So I just wondered, posing the question to maybe Nick first, and then Ren, if you maybe share your own experiences. How can we ensure that access to finance and scaling support is inclusive, particularly for those unrepresented groups? Because we hear a lot about finance only goes to a very small proportion of the business population that look at and act a particular way. So how can we together challenge that and bring about a much more kind of inclusive approach to helping businesses finance for startup and growth?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that, Gary. So I think it's a really important subject to kind of raise. I think the first thing to say, I recognise as a middle-aged white man that I have privilege, and as a result of things that have gone in the past, discrimination, just the way that life has panned out, there are opportunities that I know have come my way that it just isn't the same for everyone, be it by way of gender, be it by way of age, be it by way of ethnicity. And so I think that's the first thing, and that's a real dear thing to me, to sort of try and become a little bit of an ally in terms of trying to then light the way and try to make life a little bit more equitable for different people coming from different experiences. So I think that's the first thing. I think absolutely trying to build bridges with different communities, which I do, and through NatWest I'm lucky enough to do through a number of partners that we work alongside. And the thing that has very much taught me is about shutting up and listening. Right, that's the best thing you can do in the first instance, because these brilliant communities have been let down in the past. They've been let down by greed, by discrimination, by too many people that have kind of dismissed the problem. And so what is needed is very much about a listening ear in terms of, tell me about the barriers, tell me about the challenges you faced, but also tell me about your dreams. What does the dream look like? And again, I'll refer this back to you, Gary, like something that you said earlier about how many of the brilliant students last year were launching social impact ventures, right? Now, these are young people, I'm guessing a mix of genders and a mix of ethnicity. So long before they've sorted themselves out financially, right, they're thinking of others. And that doesn't get shared, very often at all. So I applaud everyone that took part in the last year's scheme, and hopefully more will do the same this year, because I think that needs to be amplified. I think there is an ethical case in terms of making sure that the opportunity is there for everyone. But just to back it up, there is also an economic case as well. So, for example, when it comes to ethnic minority-owned businesses, the combined impact of ethnic minority-owned businesses across the UK, when we done some research a couple of years ago, it came to £25 billion. That's how much economic income was generated for the country. But if there were the opportunity to ensure that that was more possible for everyone, then actually that economic growth could quadruple to £100 billion. So there is the ethical case, there is also the economic case, and that's why I think it's such a hugely important thing to be doing.
Thank you, Nick. Now, Ren, I'll bring you in because I know I've had the privilege of working with you on the APPG for Women's Entrepreneurship. I'm sure that you've got some insights from that you want to share, but I know also that you've had your own experiences. So, over to you. I know that this is something that you're passionate about.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Nick, because Nick, we don't get that honesty sometimes. We've done loads of webinars and what have you, or fireside chats, and to have that sort of level of honesty is very rare. So first of all, I thank you for that. And then the second thing, I just wanted to go on to a couple of things, because I'm obviously, well, I say obviously, I'm British Indian. I'm a female. And some of the subgroups that we talk about, making sure that we leave no one behind. Gary's already alluded to the Women and Enterprise APPG that we worked on, and we saw the same sort of issues. Access to finance, access to childcare, or just making sure that different cultures, or different, if you look a little bit different, they are being heard, we are being heard. heard. I think progress has been made, but I also think that a lot more progress does still need to continue to be made. So if I was talking to someone who looked like me, sounded like me, or was me, even a younger version of me, I would say, okay, there are really good pockets of really good support. You sometimes need to go and seek them out, whether that's through universities, whether we need lots of Nicks, but as in Nick Howe's, not just any Nicks, but Nick Howe. But we need lots of people like you, and also the institutions that you represent as well. And we've talked about British Business Bank. I'm a big fan of BBB because that's big on their agenda as well. We can do this. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, as long as what stood me in good stead: grit, perseverance, triple glass ceilings, breaking through those, but a network. Always think about the network, and it isn't just a network for finance. It could be a network for business, bringing business on board, whether it's business client acquisition, I call it. One big help, and this is still a policy area that needs to be worked on, is getting other businesses to buy. I call it big business supporting small business, but big businesses to buy from smaller businesses and make it easier to do that, because the best way you can succeed is through cash flow and customer acquisition. So I think that's the next big wave. How do we encourage supply chain diversity of small businesses, whether they are ethnic minority or come from the forces or come from, supporting women founders? So that's my experience, but also my pledge moving forward.
Thank you both. And Ren, I think it would be remiss to say for the audience that when Ren mentions big business supporting small business, rest assured she's already doing it. The work that they're doing at the moment, and Nick and I, again, very grateful to be involved with that, is absolutely amazing. And the support from big businesses for our small business community is actually much more than probably people give it credit for. So, Ren, again, anyone wants to learn more, do visit the website. And happy to provide more information. Get in touch. We've got some questions, which is great. So, the first question is really about business, particular sectors. So the question is really, are there any particular sectors or business models where you think alternative finance or i.e. the British Business Bank are particularly useful? So is what kind of sectors would be particularly attractive to the British Business Bank or alternative lenders? Ren, I don't know if you wanted to, or Nick, I don't mind.
I'm happy to go, and then I'm going to pass very quickly to Nick as well, because he'll be seeing some different types of businesses coming through. So I think what we need to do, regardless of alternative finance, but I know that British Business Bank and various others as well, and I'm hoping Nick will second me on this because we haven't rehearsed any of this, is that fashion, culture, construction, hospitality. We really know that there's a skills shortage in a lot of these sectors. Technology, it's not necessarily just a shortage in tech, but it's about how technology is innovating other industries as well. So if we look at what healthcare, so if those are the sort of businesses that are coming forward, I think we're really taking them, embracing them and seeing how not only how can it be something that can be funded, but actually what problem is that going to solve, and what problem or solution is that going to give to society as well. So we've got some obvious ones, and that's part of the research. If you are thinking of being an entrepreneur, or you're looking at a dissertation on entrepreneurship, dive into where are the shortages that is holding us back as an economy, as a country, as well-being as well. Well-being is one of my favourite elements, so I'm always going to be there for care and well-being solutions. Over to Nick.
Do you want to anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I just sort of say, I mean, first of all, that one of the benefits I think the UK has is strengths in so many different sectors. We've got some real talent in this country, and we talk it down too much. So, I think we need to recognise that. One trend that I've definitely seen is around people staging how much funding they have. So, for example, if you're looking to borrow £10,000, let's say for a marketing campaign, one of the first things that I'll sort of ask of you is, okay, well, in the last 6 months or so, what's been successful for you so far? So with what you've tried, what's brought new inquiries, new customers in through the front door? And again, quite often people won't have that information. So one of the challenges back there is to sort of say, well, I'm not going to recommend you borrowing £10,000 to speculatively try and build a marketing campaign, but could we spend a smaller amount of money testing some of the platforms, testing some of the exercise that we might be able to do, and then measure when we get new inquiries, new customers, where that actually comes from. So staggering how much money you get and kind of when you borrow it, I think is a good practice to have. And then the other thing I would say as well is there are some businesses, because of the market they're moving into, particularly around technology, where it's absolutely imperative that they have what they call first mover advantage. So basically they've got an offer, they've got a solution that they want to put to the market, but if they're not quick enough at growing that opportunity, then one of the big boys in the market would potentially see it and just copy it and kind of do what they want to do with it. So for those types of businesses, the need to seek and gain external investment money to actually really fast charge that operation so that actually it can go to the market, it can scale itself to a bigger sort of level and give itself some sort of defensibility, or possibly even make it quite attractive to be acquired. That is often another angle that we look at as well.
Brilliant. We've got a question here, and I think they probably relate, but I'm going to ask a question. There's one of our audience who's a freelance artist, and the question they are asking is, what's the best source of finance for me? Now, I appreciate that's quite a wide question, but perhaps a bit of context. Many of our students and graduates will be self-employed and freelancing. They may not be running businesses in the traditional sense, but a very valuable and very important part of our economy. So many of our students would welcome some kind of advice about what kind of sources of finance would be best suited to our freelancing community. Nick, maybe? Yeah.
So basically, I think I obviously don't know enough information from that question, but one of the questions I would ask back is what would you need to spend the money on? And I think there's often two kind of areas. One is around, I need some equipment, or I need a website, or I need a marketing campaign, or what have you. So that's an example of what I would call capital investment. So you'd find the money, you'd invest it in the business, and the expectation is that gradually, bit by bit, month by month, you'd actually repay that, usually in the form of a loan. The other type, or the other way of looking at that, might be a cash flow issue. So it might be that in the summer there's nothing going on, there's no money coming in, so they've still got expenses to cover, but then actually business picks up again during the winter time and Christmas periods, etc., and that's where their income may come through. So you're not necessarily looking for a loan for that type of solution. You may make do with an overdraft or something like that. So definitely very happy to have more of a conversation with that individual, but there's plenty of options out there. And I think one of the other things as well is if you're creative in particular, the importance of intellectual property, because you could come up with this logo, this brand, this design that could be the next big thing. And if you haven't trademarked it, if you haven't copyrighted it, if that's the right word, it probably isn't, copywritten, then you may be doing yourselves an injustice by not building that up as an asset that the business owns. But yeah, offline, more than happy to have another conversation with that individual.
Thank you, Nick. I've got a slightly different question, Ben. I'm going to pose it, but it's very much related, and it's very much around what's the right time to move from bootstrapping to external finance? So
Yeah,
I hope that's quite a related question.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because it's, pardon the pun, how long is a piece of string? So I will answer that from my own perspective, and having bootstrapped a couple of businesses myself in the past before then I took them to a different level. I've sort of answered this a little bit. I would, from a risk and reward perspective, it's about knowing your market. It's about knowing that there is a product or service to be sold and there's a audience for it. So what I've usually done, and this is just there's loads of different examples, but this is my example. What I've usually done is I've got the concept, I've launched that product or service, and then I've literally gone for cups of coffee and exploratory meetings to talk to that prospective, to get those, what, like Nick said, expressions of interest going. So my own cash that's gone into it, which I've bootstrapped, has really gone into getting the first part of that product or service off the ground and meeting prospective clients. And as soon as that is done and I can see there's some tangible, I will take it to the next level, and it helps with the business planning. And if I sit opposite a desk with somebody like Nick, he will be saying to me, how many do you think you're going to sell? What makes you think you're going to sell them? What is it that you need the capital for? And what do you think the likelihood of the returns are going to be? That will give me the time to go from bootstrapping to getting traditional funding. Nick, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would say I'm a massive fan of bootstrapping. I know sometimes I wonder whether it's just because I'm an employee and therefore my attitude and appetite to risk is naturally less than an entrepreneur. But I am a massive fan in terms of when you bootstrap, it really does tell you what your customers like, what they don't like, and what's kind of working. I also sometimes see that sometimes when people do have the money, sometimes there's a lot of that gets wasted. There's one group in particular where if people have been, let's say they've been made redundant and they're in their, I don't know, late 40s, early 50s, so they've got a decent redundancy package and they've got a lot of experience, but maybe not within running their own business. And they can be quite kind of, I don't want to say dangerous, but they've got the money. They don't necessarily have to ask for anyone to spend it. And what you sometimes see, there's an awful lot of money that gets wasted. They learn, they reflect on it, but only after a lot of money has been already spent. So I'm a massive fan of bootstrapping. But once you've then got a format in terms of, we know what's working, we know what customers are like, we know what seasonality and how that impacts us, then we can start to roll that into a funding application at the right time.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. There are some more questions, but I'm very conscious of time. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind if we sent some of those questions on to you, that you might just look them and we'll feedback and provide those short answers to those questions after the webinar, because I want to finish this on time. So thank you both. But before I close, I just wondered, if you could give one piece of practical advice to a student or graduate entrepreneur who wants to build and finance a business during their time at university, what would it be? One piece.
Who wants to go?
I'm sure
first?
there's more than one piece of advice. One piece of practical advice.
Yeah. Shall I go first, Nick? Okay. Network. And when we say network, I don't mean go down to the local pub and just meet as many other business owners. There's different types of networking at different points of time, whether that's networking around, angel investors or groups around funding, that sort of stuff, or whether it's networking to look at client acquisition, or whether it's networking, come and talk to us. We've got loads of online networking we can plug you straight into. So the importance of the network is also your net worth, and you will need different types of networks at different points of your journey, and sometimes a couple of different ones at the same time. So understanding networks and being part of networks. And I think Nick said there's a bit of a tribe as well, as in, you know, find your tribe. There's that, but also find what's not in your tribe too. It's important.
Yeah,
Thank
totally.
you, Nick.
Concur with that. Network is such an important part, such a huge asset. So any student dialing in today, start building your network, because for the next 10, 20, 30 years, you know, you're only going to build on that, hopefully. I think the one sort of phrase that I would probably use, and I use it all the time, fall in love with your customer's problem, not your solution to it. And that really captures, I think, where sometimes when people launch businesses, you know, they might have a particular taste in food or fashion or entertainment or whatever it might be. And we sometimes get too passionate about it, thinking that everyone thinks the same as us. And the harsh reality is that they may not. So I think by all means be passionate about what it is that you want to do, the area of work that you want to set a business up in, but don't be so hung up on what the end picture of that business looks like. Let that be influenced and shaped by the feedback, by customer feedback, by sentiment, by what you see the competition are offering or not offering. I think that's a hugely important kind of lesson to share. And there's definitely an invitation as well to anyone on the call today or after. If you want to tap into any of the support offered through the NatWest Accelerator app, just simply go online, download the app. NatWest Accelerator, it's completely free, and you can start consuming at a time and a pace that suits you. So yeah, feel free to access that as well.
Thank you both. And I suppose just to kind of come, my own reflection is, think very carefully what you're using funding for. A lot of funding is smart money. Smart funding that Nick mentioned is really important. There's a lot that you can do without money. Network, lots of access to there's equity, and within a university setting, you've got access to a wide range of different people, resources, and expertise. Utilize that first and think very carefully where the money can be spent the best to take your idea forward into reality. So thank you very much, Ren, Nick. Really enjoyed that. Could have probably speak for another hour, but we've got other things that we do. But can I just formally thank you both for spending your time and your insights and your expertise. I'm sure many of the audience have enjoyed that, and thank you again for agreeing to maybe just follow up with some of the questions we were unable to ask today. Just a quick thank you to Sam and Umkar, who have been working behind the scenes, making sure that this all runs perfectly. And thanks again for spending time with us at Anglia Ruskin and the Anglia Ruskin Enterprise Academy. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.